It all begins with a group of explorers stumbling upon an Ice Age glacier containing a girl within it, an ancient goddess who had fallen asleep for thousands of years. The men are baffled, and one of them instructs someone to get in touch with the Arcane Court when the goddess asks them to bring the best player of that era to her. In this world, the gods live bored and grant arises to humans superhuman or magical powers that make them apostles and give them the ability to challenge the gods in games. Currently, for the first time, 3 games against gods are happening simultaneously, marking a historic moment where people from all over the world stop to watch. A boy named Faye walks through the streets when he passes by a screen broadcasting the 3 games. Each of them has several players who were striving their hardest to win the challenges. However, despite all the effort, all the more than 100 apostles lose or give up on victory, concluding the 3 games without any wins for humans. Faye finishes watching the broadcast and decides to follow the path as he is also one of the challengers, who is actually well known as several people on the street identify the apostle. The guy goes to a place called the Ruined Branch Office of the Arcane Court, where other challengers recognize him as soon as he arrives. Faye is greeted by the manager Miranda, a person he hadn't seen in 6 months. The two enter the elevator, and the manager explains to Faye that a year ago, an ancient goddess was removed from permanently frozen ground, and she asked for the best player of that era, which is undoubtedly him. Faye remembers the incident as well as the fact that the goddess was taken to the Arcane Court, as it's a nearby location where she was found. Then Miranda explains that she is a peculiar goddess because in the past, she hid during a game of tag with humans, but fell asleep while hiding and took a freezing nap for 3,000 years, and apparently she is the avatar of fire in the form of a dragon. The manager also explains that the girl is a former goddess whose powers have been weakened, although she is still quite powerful, and therefore she should not be provoked because she could easily turn the city to ashes. Faye asks why they are dealing with such a dangerous goddess, and Miranda says that initially, no one knew her capability, but now they want him to keep an eye on the girl. The guy panics upon learning that he had gone there to be a watchdog for a goddess. Miranda explains that humans still don't know the reason for the descent of the higher spiritual beings, the gods, to Earth, and therefore they want to find out why the goddess is still there, and he is the only one capable of performing this task. Faye understands that he is the most qualified because the power of the gods is too great, and they can easily destroy humans. But as he has the Arise, which does not die, he is ideal for dealing with the girl, and Miranda reveals that it was the goddess herself who chose him. Next, the two enter the room where the goddess was waiting, and Faye notices the thousands of games that were everywhere, noticing that she clearly loves games. Then he picks up 2 dice and rolls them to get the numbers he wants. Miranda is puzzled by how he managed to do that, and Faye explains that all he needs to do is leave the opposite sides of the numbers he wants facing up and roll the dice with the perfect force to make them turn around. At that moment, the goddess appears, and Faye immediately notices the resemblance she has to a woman he knew as a child. Miranda introduces him as the best player, who managed to win 3 games against gods in the 3 years he became an apostle, and says he was appointed as a supervisor. Miranda introduces the goddess named Liolxie and asks the guy to introduce himself to her. However, Faye remains paralyzed, observing her resemblance to the person he knew in his past. The 2 girls don't understand what happened to Faye, and Miranda decides to return to her work and leave them alone to get to know each other better. But before leaving, she reminds Faye that he must do his best as a supervisor. As soon as Miranda leaves the room, Liolxie flies closer to Faye and tells them to entertain themselves in a game. The guy tries to say they could just talk, but the goddess says they will introduce themselves in a game. And so Liolxie starts arranging some cards on the table, while Faye wonders if that will be one of the games against gods since they were not in the elements, where the challenges happen. Then he notices that the cards have words written on them like names, age, hometown, dreams, and hobbies. The goddess explains that she made that game when she was bored and that it's called the Presentation Memory Game, which has the same rules as a memory game with a deck of cards, but instead of matching identical numbers, you must match a pair of self-presentation topics, and when that happens, the other must introduce themselves according to the card. In other words, if she draws the pair of hometown cards, for example, he must talk about where he came from. After explaining the rules, Liolxie starts shuffling the cards while asking Faye to respond honestly to whatever pairs come up. The guy agrees but asks her to shuffle the cards again because he memorized their positions when the goddess placed them on the table to explain the rules, and he followed them with his eyes as they were being shuffled, an old habit from when he trained with someone in his past. Liolxie is impressed by Faye's skill and admires his desire to play fairly and not cheat to win. Then the goddess finds it a waste for them to play on a table and uses a power to make all the cards float and spin in the air. Faye observes that he never forgets a card, and surely his opponent is also like that, and that way it would make things harder because they would continuously change places. The goddess decides to add one more rule, to limit the participants to a single turn, unlike a regular memory game where whoever finds a pair can repeat the turn. And Faye observes that this makes that game much more than just memorization, which gets them both excited to play. Meanwhile, Miranda watches them through a hidden camera. Faye is the first one to play and draws the cards of hometown and blood type. Due to the theme, he asks if gods have blood. The girl explains that yes, and it's hotter than lava, with a single drop capable of melting that building, but if he wants to know more, he'll need the blood type pair. Next, Leolishi picks a name card and another from hometown. Then, with the first pair of cards revealed, the goddess asks if Faye knows their position, and he effortlessly retrieves them. Leolishi then reveals that her hometown, like that of most gods, is in elements, the place humans call the higher spiritual realm, and need to use a special door to enter. As they play, Miranda recalls that all games against gods take place in elements, and as a prize for winning, apostles can use part of their arise in the real world. The more victories they achieve, the more they can use these powers necessary to discover unexplored lands. In this world, 93% of the planet remains unexplored and harbors large creatures everywhere. Additionally, apostles lose the right to play after 3 defeats and complete the game with 10 victories, which include the celebration as a prize. This is something humanity doesn't understand the meaning of, as no one has ever achieved so many victories. But Miranda thinks perhaps Faye might be able to accomplish this goal. Back to the memory game, Faye comments on Leolishi's swift response regarding her hometown, and the goddess reminds him that it's the rule of the game, and that rules aren't mere restrictions, but a form of entertainment. Later, she gets the pair of name cards. Faye realizes he hasn't introduced himself yet and explains that his name is Faye Theophilus. The goddess then asks if he has a nickname. Faye denies it, but this makes him realize that the game requires not only memorization, but also thinking about what questions to ask with the pairs of cards he acquired to cover as many questions as he wants. Furthermore, since the goal is to get to know the opponent, even if he knows the position of a pair of cards, not picking up some may be the key to victory. He must choose the theme of the cards he picks carefully to gather as much information as possible, since each player has only 1 turn per round. After a while of playing, Faye discovers where the cards he needs are, but at this moment, Leolishi gets a pair he desired, a blank card that allows any question, similar to the Joker in a regular deck of cards. The goddess comments that she really wanted that pair of cards and reminds Faye that she asked him to answer questions honestly. Immediately, she changes her expression and asks what Faye's true reason for wanting to approach her is, making it clear that she won't allow him to lie. Faye observes the power the goddess clearly possesses and recalls again the person from his past. Then he notices that they both were after the Joker pair and that he's enjoying the game, so he decides to be honest. Faye reveals that his task is to keep an eye on Leolishi because Miranda wants to know who she is and what her goals are. The manager panics, thinking that this will make the goddess furious and turn the city into ashes. However, Leolishi says she was already expecting a response like that and thanks Faye for his honesty and for playing with her. Leolishi says she wouldn't ask such a question to a human she doesn't know and asks Faye to call her just Leshy because he doesn't need to be formal with her since he answered her question in line with the game's objective, and the distance between them prevents them from properly enjoying themselves. Then, Leolishi floats the pairs of cards Faye acquired, being dreams, hometown, and hobbies. Faye realizes that the game's goal isn't simply to get the pairs, unlike the original memory game, because it didn't make sense for him to pick the name cards if he already knew his opponent's name. After all, that wouldn't provide any new information and he would have just wasted his turn. That additional rule of always being a single turn forced them both to weigh the cards and information they wanted to acquire. Faye admits that it was an enjoyable adjustment. Then Leolishi asks what Faye would have asked if he had gotten the blank cards. After all, to discover her goals as he wanted, he just needed the pairs of dream cards. Realizing that Leolishi was willing to clear his doubt, Faye asks why the goddess stays in that world and doesn't return to elements, and why she chose him among many other more skilled apostles. Leolishi explains that Faye is the only beginner with 3 victories, something very few achieved in a century, and that's why she wants to finish the game of the gods with him. She reveals that she came to Earth to play with humans but found out she couldn't return to her world and become a goddess again without getting the 10 victories required in the game of the gods. Faye is surprised and asks if she knows what the celebration is, the prize for those who achieve the 10 victories. The goddess confirms and explains that the human theory is almost correct. The gods will grant 1 wish to the apostle who completes the game. But unlike what humanity deduce, it's not just 1 wish, but as many as the winner wishes to make. Then she pulls him and takes him to the entrance of the Divine Gate, which he recognizes as the dive center. Leolishi then says she's been waiting a long time for a human like him. After that, they both cross the Divine Gate and end up in a higher spiritual realm, where a huge creature resides. Before Faye could process what was happening, a small creature announces the start of the game, a god's tag. Hey folks, we're kicking off the new anime season, and if you enjoyed this anime and want to see more of it, go ahead and hit that like button down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to reach our goal of 70,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you next time.